of this side event. First of all, I'd like to introduce myself. I am Mahdi Muhabbirat, the Executive Director of the Organization for Defending Victims of Violence. Before I start the side event, I would like to draw your attention to a video by one of the organizers of the side event. Unfortunately, he couldn't attend this side event today.
Ladies and gentlemen, greeting, welcome, and thank you all for joining us today at this side event. We are honored to have your presence and participation. This panel is organized by the Family Health Association of Iran, a non-governmental organization actively working in the field of health. My name is Hamid Reza Afsari and I am the CEO of the FHAI. Unfortunately, I am unable to be with you in person today and I sincerely apologize for my absence. However, this side event will be managed by my dear friend and colleague, Dr. Mohebi, who will moderate the panel. Today, we gather to shed light on the severe human rights violations occurring in the occupied Palestinian territories with focus on the right to health. The ongoing conflict has had devastating effects on the health and well-being of the Palestinian people. Access to essential health care services is severely restricted and many are deprived of the medical attention they urgently need. It is our hope that through this discussion we can raise awareness, advocate for change, and contribute to a future where the right to health is universally respected and protected. Thank you once again for being here. Your engagement and support are invaluable as we work together towards a more just and healthy world for all. Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you. We will be focusing on human rights situation in Gaza in this session, and I would like to express a few points on recent ICJ order on May 24th. South Africa requested the court to modify the previous orders on provisional measures because there has been some changes in the situation justifying such modification. For the court, there has been some change in the situation since its order of 28 March 2024. This is because, according to the ICJ, the catastrophic humanitarian situation in Gaza, which it previously noted was at risk of deteriorating, has deteriorated. And with respect to Rafah, the court noted that fears it expressed in its decision of 16th February have now materialized and that humanitarian situation is now to be characterized as disastrous. The court also refers to the displacement of the population, and we can say at this point that there are no more words to describe the dire situation in Gaza. The words exceptionally grave, disastrous, and catastrophic have all been used to describe the current situation. Almost daily, we are confronted with the images of unimaginable suffering. The ICJ, in explicit terms, ordered Israel to halt its offensive in Rafah. And as a final point, some questions might be raised about the implementation of the ICJ judgment in the current case for the future. And I would like to draw your attention to Article 94.2 of the Charter of the UN, which it stated that if any party fails to perform the obligations under a judgment, the other party may have recourse to the Security Council. But take a look at this point that the court is only a court. So our first speaker is Ms. Julie Frank, the Vice President of Yafa Association, a Swiss NGO, which is a bridge about a relationship actually and a link between Switzerland and Palestine. And he will discuss the current situation in Gaza and her experiences in this regard. Ms. Frank, you have the floor.
Thank you. I'm actually not going to talk about the current situation, or only very little, because I was actually invited to speak here not as a political expert, which I'm not, but to share my personal experience of Gaza and the Gazan people, because a concrete testimony helps understand the situation and complements political analysis. So here are a few facts about Gaza when I was there in 2018, so 5 years before the current war started. There is actually two major sets of facts that I want to share, which may seem contradictory. On the one side, the extremely harsh living conditions of the Gazan people. On the other side, the admirable development of the Gazan civil society. Let me start with the catastrophic living conditions, and I insist I'm talking about the situation before the 7th of October. When I was there in 2018, already 80% of the population depended on humanitarian aid. Gaza had been enduring the consequences of an almost total land, sea, and air blockade since 2007. Many people were living in rudimentary conditions in camps. For example, I saw the Bureij refugee camp, where people were already living in tents, covered with plastic sheets or blankets, no water, no electricity, no sanitation. Similar situations concerned the many other camps in Gaza that I passed by, like the beach camp, Shati camp, Nuseirat camp, Deir el-Balah camp, Marazi camp, and Khan Yunis camp. When driving across the Gaza Strip, I saw thousands of buildings damaged or destroyed by the wars of 2008, 12, and 14. My friends told me it was impossible to rebuild them because the blockade prevented the entrance of materials necessary for their reconstruction. Along the sea, there was a huge pile of building debris, many meters high, because there was also no solution for dealing with this broken concrete. When I was there, I experienced frequent power cuts and water shortages, which have major consequences on health, agriculture, industry, but also sanitation. For example, wastewater was directly discharged into the sea, generating a nauseating smell that took me a while to get accustomed to. Yet, my Gazan friends would spend Friday afternoons on little plastic chairs by the sea without even seeing it because of the wall of debris. Power cuts and water shortages also disrupted daily life, like cooking, heating, cleaning, showering. Some houses have water tanks on the roof, but many don't. The stress of living with constant uncertainty regarding power and water supply is weighing on mental health. Some of my friends in Gaza had physical disabilities due to illnesses or mutilations. They told me that Gaza had all the necessary knowledge and tools to create artificial limbs for the thousands of mutilated children and adults who suffer disabilities. But again, the blockade prevented the entry of some necessary pieces. I was in Gaza during the Great March of Return, a movement of weekly peaceful demonstrations at the border, which had started in March that year. The demonstrators were demanding that Palestinian refugees be allowed to return to the lands they were displaced from, and they protested against the blockade. The media here barely spoke about that movement. They showed a few images of men with their faces covered with kefir, setting wires on fire, and told us that people were paid by Hamas to demonstrate. This is not what I saw. When I arrived there, I first saw hundreds of people of all ages, families, and lots of children gathering with music under the shade of big tents, and people selling grilled corn and sunflower seeds. It reminded me of the atmosphere of the Marche de l'Espoir, the March of Hope, that takes place every year here in Geneva. I asked my friends to get closer to the border, following some girls and boys holding small catapults on their belts. As we approached, I saw more clearly tanks and heavily armed soldiers on the other side of the fence. We stayed at a distance, watching these determined young people throwing stones, and soldiers shooting at them. On the 3 hours I stayed there, 2 of them got injured and 1 was killed. Each time, the same scenario: the shooting, the shouting, an ambulance, a chaotic crowd running after it, and those determined young people continuing to throw stones. I will never forget these images, as well as those of young teenagers I saw riding their bikes on the rear wheel against the direction of traffic on Salah ad-Din Road. These images illustrate both the lack of faith in life and the determination of this young generation. After more than a year of pacific demonstrations, the Great March of Return stopped. Nothing had changed. The world had not opened its eyes, despite the 195 people killed, including 41 minors, and despite the more than 7,000 injured by gunfire out of a total of 29,000 injured. A few days before I was about to leave, fights started in the south as an Israeli commando had entered the Gaza Strip. The personnel of all international NGOs were evacuated from the Strip the following day, but I could not leave. Massive bombings took place the following nights, killing 40 people, injuring 120 others, and destroying 160 sites, including the building of Al-Aqsa Radio and a building a few meters from where I was, containing the medical files of patients treated in Israel. The media here barely talked about it. After all, it's part of the Gazan routine. Now let me say a few words about the admirable development of the Gazan civil society, despite these huge obstacles. Gaza had 32 hospitals, private and public. Public healthcare services were accessible to all residents without charge. Most of the medication was free. I saw the Shifa Hospital, a modern, large medical complex with multiple departments. I met the director of the Society of Physically Handicapped People, a center treating nearly 15,000 patients with a holistic approach, providing not only medical treatment and physical rehabilitation, but also psychological and social coaching, as well as education about patients' rights. There were more than 700 schools in the Gaza Strip. I visited one of them, as well as a school for special needs in Gaza City, which also had a branch in Rafah. I interacted with directors and teachers. I was baffled by the intelligence of the approaches, the use of cutting-edge pedagogical, psychological, and therapeutical methods, including for speech therapy, which is my area of expertise. I also discussed with psychologists and social workers and learned about the exemplary close connection between all these practitioners and academic scholars from universities who were directly involved in education and social structures. Gaza had 11 universities and higher education institutions. I was able to visit and meet with members of the administration of Al-Quds University and to appreciate the high quality of their programs. All professors had a PhD from abroad. They were part of the Erasmus program with partnerships with universities in Italy, Spain, Portugal, and Turkey. I found out that academic training and research in psychology and social work there are deeply interconnected with civil society institutions, a connectivity which is too often lacking in our Western societies. And indeed, Gaza has a reputation for its strong educational institutions and high literacy rate compared to other parts of the Arab world, which is why many Gazan teachers are often hired in Arab countries. Some of my friends in Gaza were leading the Peace Club for People with Disabilities, a center that was providing sport activities to hundreds of people with physical handicap. The center worked in partnership with the Society of Physically Handicapped People, but also with some schools and universities, attesting again to the well-integrated network of social structure. My friends brought me to the most impressive basketball match I ever saw. It was in Khan Younis, one of the poorest areas of the Strip. The players, all in wheelchairs, played with endless energy, regularly falling and finding ways to stand up again on their chair, alone, without help, determined like every single person I met in Gaza. It's hard to think about what is left of all this today. In 2015 already, a UN report had announced that Gaza would be completely uninhabitable by 2020. A few years later, UN Secretary General Guterres declared that if there is a hell on earth, it is the lives of children in Gaza. So during the war of May 2021, my Gazan friend in Geneva and I developed Yafa, a small Genevan NGO, which since then provided community-based psychosocial support to more than 10,000 children in the poorest areas of the Gaza Strip, areas that had no or only very little support from international NGOs. Our local team there consists of social workers, psychologists, and artists who strive together to develop imaginative activities to help children find hope in the future. Today, we have completely lost contact with 4 members of our team. One of our most active members, Mohammed, has been captured during the IDF 2-week raid on Shifa Hospital last March. We filed a search request with the Red Cross, but the Israeli authorities do not want to provide it with any information, arguing that the Red Cross failed to help them retrieving the hostages. Mohammed is probably among the 4,000 to 5,000 detainees taken from Gaza this last month. We need help to find him. I will end with the words that my dear 25-year-old friend Khulud, who is currently living in the only room left of her bombed home in Gaza City, asked me to tell you today. Here's what she wrote. Tell them that after more than 9 months of bleeding, we still have no idea when we can have a normal life without bombing, horror, and death. Tell them that the accursed army has stripped the color, life, spirit, and memories of everything. They have crushed homes, trees, people, and even stones. But we are Palestinians, and we are proud. We carry a lot of sadness, grief, anger, but we also carry the stubbornness mixed with the soil of the place where we come from. Tell them that Gaza is the most beautiful place on earth, the most deserving of life. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Frank. And actually, your experiences in the OPT and the dire situation there were impressive. The dire situation in Gaza has sparked widespread demonstrations in solidarity with the Palestinian people in universities in different countries. These peaceful assemblies and legitimate exercise of the right to freedom of expression unfortunately have faced harsh crackdowns. In this regard, the UN Special Rapporteur on the freedom of peaceful assembly and of association has prepared an exclusive video about crackdown on pro-Palestine mobilization. Before playing this video, I would like to thank the Special Rapporteur again for her participation in this event.
Hi to everyone who is here with us today. Thanks to the organization for defending victims of violence for the invitation. Since October of last year, mobilizations of all kinds with very diverse formats and diverse agendas have multiplied worldwide. According to information from various sources, massive demonstrations and marches, as well as occupations and camps, have been carried out in different parts of the world, both in support of Israel and in solidarity with the Palestinian people. According to the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, between October 7th and the end of November 2023, demonstrations in support of Israel were recorded in at least 39 countries, while more than 80 countries have witnessed demonstrations in support of Palestine. Other sources indicate that more than 170 camps were established, especially in university environments, distributed in around 35 countries. This massive mobilization, which has lasted over time and is unprecedented in recent history, emerged in a context of serious limitations on the right of peaceful assembly at a global level. According to the Civicus Monitor, by 2022, about a third of the world's population live in countries with restricted civic space, which translates into a severe impact on freedom of expression, freedom of peaceful assembly, and freedom of association. So it is important to understand that the crackdown of the peace movement does not come along, but is part of a global trend, an anti-protest virus, which has unfortunately been establishing and spreading for several years now. As Ms. Katerina's report mentioned, in some countries, demonstrations considered pro-Palestinian have been banned, while in other places they have faced serious stigmatization and even criminalization. However, I must say that the response of the security forces has been uneven. While in different places, police have refused to apply prohibitions and refused to repress, disperse, or use forces to manage peaceful assembly, and even have established peace units to be in permanent contact with protesters. But in other places, there have been excessive and violent reactions against protesters or people who were in camps, the disproportionate use of less lethal weapons, and also many arrests. The interesting thing about this is that there are a radical difference between countries, but also between cities in the same country and even between protests carried out in the same city. Likewise, there have been clashes between protesters and participants in counter-protest, infiltrations and attacks by violent actors on demonstration and student camps. The specific situation of protest and other solidarity actions that take place in university environments, as well as the institutional response in this regard is reflecting a potential hostile environment for the exercise of the rights of assembly and association. This is why I am holding meetings with students and faculty members from a very wide number of universities in the US, in the UK, France, the Netherlands, and Germany. I had also received information from the situation in universities in Canada, Australia, and I've been studying different countries in MENA region, their situation there. I am also contacting and having conversations with law enforcers. I have not finished the interviews and meetings, but based on the allegations and the situations I've studied, I can mention some common trends that I have found I can share with you all today. One, there has been an unequal treatment of protesters depending on the political position. For example, I was very surprised to see a couple of weeks ago at a mobilization in Berlin that was calling for the return of the Israeli hostages, a person with a sign that said, from the river to the sea, we could live in unity, which did not generate any reaction from the police present at the scene. But according to the information I have received, the presence of such a sign, the same sign, at a pro-Palestinian protest would have received a very different treatment. Second, in turn, there has been similar responses to very different type of protests, from vigils to encampments to building occupations. For example, in some cases, riot police that can use less lethal weapons against students, and even bomb squads were sent to attend silent vigils in a clearly disproportionate reaction. Third, both the police repression and the university sanction in some places have affected disproportionately migrant students from very specific ethnic groups and leaderships. In several cases, a clear police profiling can be easily identified. 4, university sanctions are in some countries weaponizing migrant status, housing, and the access of food. 5, people interviewed ensured a close alliance between university and the city's police that had led to an increase of surveillance on campus with the installation of new cameras and facial recognition processes, but also online surveillance. 6, the universities have changed the rules of the Go in an arbitrary way. These changes are taken without consent, mostly without consultation with the students and with no transparency and clear information. Several students mentioned how in a single day the rules can change 3 or 4 times. They were talking about rules at the universities, but this had also happened in some countries regarding the police ruling on protest on the street. 7, closing campuses, including libraries, in exam periods was seen as a collective punishment on a student population to make other students to be against protest and physically impeding them to participate. This has created an immediate chilling effect that affects deeply the exercise of the right of freedom of peaceful assembly. 7, in some cases, violence and harassment does not come from the police or from counter-protesters, but from external actors not affiliated with universities that perform acts of harassment, such as following students to dorms or houses, shooting at them on the streets, and others. To end, I want to remind you of some basic international standards associated with freedom of assembly, many of which do not seem to be respected now. First, the states have the obligation to abstain from unduly interfering with the rights of peaceful assembly, but also to facilitate and protect them. This means ensuring that the rights of peaceful assembly and of peaceful association are enjoyed by everyone without discrimination on the basis of race, color, sex, language, religion, political or other opinion, national or social origin, and age. Second, any restriction on the exercise of peaceful assembly must comply with requirements of legal necessity and proportionality. So this means that it needs to be contained in laws or administrative resolution that are precise. Also that it needs to consider the value of the protest and take into account its objectives. And third, that are proportional, not only to the interests that are intended to be protected, but also the nature of the harmful effect must be weighted against the result of the benefit. Third, the prohibition of a specific assembly can be considered only as a measure of last resort. Where the imposition of restrictions on an assembly is deemed necessary, the authorities should first seek to apply the less intrusive measure. 4, failure to notify authorities of an assembly does not render an assembly unlawful, and consequently should not be used as a basis of dispersing it. Where there has been failure of properly notify, organizers, community of political leaders should not be subject to criminal or administrative sanction, including fines or imprisonment. 5, states should facilitate and protect peaceful assembly, including through negotiation and mediation. The use of force by law enforcement officials should be exceptional, and assemblies should ordinarily be managed with no resort to force. Any use of force must comply with the principles of necessity and proportionality. Acts of sporadic violence of other punishable actors committed in the middle of the protest do not deprive peaceful individuals of the right of peaceful assembly. And also the use of face covering or other disguises should not itself be deemed signifying violent intent. 6, the management of the protest must be always content neutral. I invite you all to know the model protocol for law enforcement officials to promote and protect human rights in the context of peaceful protest that was developed by my antecessor in collaboration with the United Nations Office on Drug and Crime and the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner of Human Rights. I am very happy of being able to share this information with you. I hope the conversation today is fruitful. Thank you again for the invitation.
Thank you, Ms. Special Rapporteur. Another problem that the people in Gaza are dealing with are health issues. Severe shortage of medicines and the destruction of the health sector in the Gaza Strip are some of these examples. According to reports, 9 out of 10 children in Gaza lack food for growth. In this regard, Mr. Rauf Solti, founder and president of the Children's Right to Healthcare, is the next speaker who will focus on violations of mental and physical integrity and impacts of actually genocide on health sector. Mr. Solti, the floor is yours.
Merci. Je vais parler en français. Donc, je remercie l'organisateur de m'avoir invité pour cet événement en tant que président de CRH et en tant qu'humanitaire, un chirurgien qui a effectué 24 missions humanitaires dont la majorité était en Palestine et dont 7 dans la bande de Gaza. Donc, rapidement pour vous dire que le système de santé avant cette dernière guerre, malgré sa modestie, il fournissait tout de même des services et des prestations pour environ 2 300 000 citoyens de tout âge et dans différentes spécialités jusqu'à la transplantation rénale. Donc, aujourd'hui, et 9 mois après cette guerre intensive lancée donc par l'armée israélienne sur la bande de Gaza, le système de la santé a été principalement ciblé et utilisé comme une arme de guerre. Les hôpitaux ont été transformés en cimetières pour les patients, les médecins et toute autre équipe médicale. Cette destruction des infrastructures de santé, qui est habituellement protégée par la Convention de Genève, est un réel crime de guerre, comme il était mentionné dans ces conventions. Elle a abouti à détruire les services de santé en général pour les civils et l'incapacité de secourir les blessés. Et ceci aussi a entraîné à propager les maladies contagieuses et les pandémies et qu'on ne peut pas les soigner par le blocus et par l'empêchement de toute entrée d'aide humanitaire, que ce soit médicaments ou autre. Tout ceci donc mène la population devant 2 choix dont le résultat est le même. Soit mourir sous le bombardement, dans les maisons, dans les tentes, des foyers de refuge, soit mourir de la famine, la soif, la maladie contagieuse dans cette situation. Donc c'est une souffrance qui s'enregistre dans une page noire, malheureusement, de notre histoire, et une honte à la société internationale, surtout pour les complicités dans ce projet en cours et qui garde le silence avec une passivité inconcevable et honteuse. Dans la bande de Gaza, il y a 5% des patients sont atteints des maladies psychiatriques. Ils se trouvent aujourd'hui, malheureusement, sans établissement spécialisé et sans médicaments pour traiter leur maladie. Aujourd'hui, nous comptons un grand nombre d'enfants et d'adultes même qui développent des troubles neuropsychiatriques liés à cet environnement de terreur permanent, notamment chez les enfants bombardés dans leur maison, dans leur refuge. En particulier lorsqu'ils perdent la totalité ou une partie de leur famille. Ce qu'on appelle le syndrome PTSD, le Post-Traumatic Stress Disorder, qui aboutit à des troubles de mémoire, à des échanges négatifs avec les autres, et qu'il faudrait un traitement qui ne se trouve pas aujourd'hui dans la bande de Gaza, des antidépresseurs, des anxiolytiques. Cette guerre donc va laisser un grand pourcentage de personnes handicapées, en particulier des enfants, afin que ce projet et l'objectif, donc ce projet atteint ses objectifs, qui est la création d'une société handicapée dans cette partie du monde. Aujourd'hui, la communauté internationale est impuissante. Face à cela, elle ne peut que dénoncer par la parole de manière dénuée de sens face à cette agression israélienne et à son projet. Les chiffres approximatifs aujourd'hui qui changent d'une heure à l'autre indiquent qu'environ plus que 36 000 personnes ont été tuées, dont 40% des enfants, 80 000 blessés, dont plus que la moitié des enfants, sans parler des morts, des disparus sous le décombre qui sont comptés entre 10 et 15 000 personnes. Aujourd'hui, malheureusement, et sur la base des normes du système de santé international, nous pouvons dire que la bande de Gaza est sans aucune infrastructure sanitaire. Le comité et les institutions internationales doivent exercer une pression de toutes sortes sur Israël pour cesser immédiatement le feu, pour permettre d'entrer des aides humanitaires, pour reconstruire les infrastructures sanitaires, reconstruire des habitations dignes pour éviter toute maladie par manque d'hygiène, effectuer des missions médicales spécialisées pour aider les médecins gazaouis, faire évacuer les cas difficiles dans les pays limitrophes afin de donner les soins nécessaires. Après, j'ai essayé donc de chercher, c'est quoi le droit de l'enfant dans une institution internationale comme celle qu'on est ici dedans. Donc, il y a ce qu'on appelle la Convention de droits de l'enfant, ou le HRC, Convention on the Right of the Child. Donc, cette convention internationale a été votée à l'Assemblée générale de les Nations Unies le 20 novembre 1989. Il a été signé par tous les pays membres, même les États-Unis. Il l'a signé, mais sans la ratifier. Les autres pays, ils ont signé et ratifié, mais les États-Unis n'ont pas ratifié cette charte. Ceci dit, qu'est-ce que ça veut dire? Ça veut dire qu'ils ne sont pas légalement obligés d'appliquer ces conventions. Même Israël a signé cette convention en octobre 1991. Il a aussi ratifié. Et donc, légalement, il est obligé de respecter cette convention internationale. Aujourd'hui, on ne voit pas les choses comme ils devaient l'être. Je vous ai pris quelques petites notions. Le droit d'identité, tous les Palestiniens aujourd'hui, dans les côtés administratifs, il n'y a pas de nationalité. Next. Voilà, donc le droit à la santé, on voit qu'il n'y a plus d'infrastructures de santé à Gaza. Le droit de santé également, on voit les nouveau-nés qui se trouvent sans oxygène. Le droit à vivre avec les parents. On a aujourd'hui 24 à 25 000 orphelins à Gaza suite au bombardement. Le droit à l'éducation, 206 écoles sont endommagées à Gaza. Ils ne sont pas aptes à accueillir les élèves. Donc, la protection, protection des enfants de terreur et de dommages physiques et psychologiques. On voit le droit aussi de vivre et de survivre et de se développer. On voit beaucoup d'enfants donc morts, on a dit plus que 40% qui sont morts dans cette guerre. La protection également contre toute forme d'agression physique ou mentale, etc. Et on voit que les statistiques ils disent qu'il y a 500 à 700 enfants qui sont arrêtés par l'armée israélienne chaque année et les conditions de détention sont inhumaines, qu'ils soient sur le plan physique, émotionnel ou des abus de raclée, de confinement dans une cellule solitaire, etc. Et les droits même basiques comme la nourriture et les médicaments. Sans parler de trafic d'organes qui était reporté par l'Euromed Human Rights Monitor. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Mr. Salti, for your comprehensive remarks. Due to the lack of interpreter here, if it is possible to you, in the end of the meeting, if you have time, you can tell us a gist of your remarks in English in 1 minute after in the final.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Ms. Corina Mullin is our next speaker. She is the professor in the Department of Political Science at John Jay College, the City University of New York. Ms. Mullin, you have the floor. Please try to speak within about 9 minutes. Thanks.
Hello, can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much. I just want to thank the organizers of this panel for inviting me, and thank you to the incredible presentations and my colleagues on the panel with me. I've learned so much from your presentations. As we know, the human rights and humanitarian crisis in Gaza and Palestine more broadly at the moment is horrific. In fact, the brutal US-backed settler colonial genocide of the Palestinian people is not new and even predates the 1948 Nakba, as colonial violence and dispossession started during the years of the League of Nations established a British mandate over Palestine from 1922 to 1948. The US-backed Israeli genocide that has been underway since October 7th has caused the death of tens of thousands of Palestinians, including at least 15,000 children. And as the Save the Children International report just a few days ago reported, at least 21,000 children are missing. We've seen horrific images, the genocide unfolding in real time on social media, of children blown to smithereens and entire families annihilated. The genocide has also targeted life-giving and life-sustaining institutions and infrastructure. Every single university in Gaza has been destroyed. Hospitals and refugee camps have been bombed, agricultural lands obliterated, and thousands of students and over 100 academic workers have been killed. You've heard from my colleagues about the horrific humanitarian crisis and situation in Gaza at the moment. So I don't have much to add on that in that area, except I would like to focus now on the role of and the repression of the student movement in the United States that was also touched upon as well by the previous speakers. So the university students and academic workers across the US have been horrified by the genocide in Gaza. They refuse to continue with business as usual while this genocide is being carried out with US bombs, US money, our tax dollars. As someone who contributes to this system, we learned just yesterday, for example, that the US government gave an additional $6.5 billion for this genocide. And that's in addition to the $3.8 billion that's given annually. So it's our wages as people working in the US, our students, our children's tuition dollars that are going to funding this genocide. And the student movement in solidarity with Palestine has been growing and recognizing these material ties and the complicity of our institutions in this genocide. Since October 7th, students have issued statements, petitions, and protests demanding that our universities take a stand against the genocide, demonstrating their support for Palestinian liberation and divestment from war, apartheid, genocide, and dispossession. However, our university administrations, and that includes my own, the City University of New York, have largely ignored these demands. They've ignored, gaslighted, and repressed our student organizers. These encampments, the encampments that have arisen across the country in response to the genocide, are also responding to that context of repression and gaslighting by university administrators. The students have courageously taken risks. They've put everything on the line: their academic status, their future careers, their housing, their families, in some cases, even immigration status. They have risked and indeed faced arrest as well as state violence. This has inspired many faculty members to join and support the encampments and support the student movement. They recognize the historical role that direct action, including the occupation of university buildings and spaces, has played historically in student movements in this country, going back to the student-led anti-imperialist and racial justice struggles of the 1960s, which contributed to important policy changes and ending the war in Vietnam, and as well as, of course, the struggles in the 1980s to end apartheid in South Africa. Similar to the motivations driving past occupations, these students and many of their faculty members took these risks because they could no longer tolerate the complicity of their universities, their tuition dollars, their wages being used to slaughter the Palestinian people and undermine their fundamental rights to life, freedom, self-determination, and the right of return of Palestinian refugees. The mainstream media has unfortunately distorted and demonized the student movement and contributed to its repression in a way that echoes the distortions of the Palestinian liberation struggle, a struggle that is not only morally and ethically just, but also one supported by international law. By dehumanizing Palestinian people, these distortions have been used to manufacture consent for genocide in Gaza. In the case of the student movement, these distortions have contributed to criminalizing the movement to justify its violent repression. As anyone who has participated, though, in these encampments can attest, they have been beautiful spaces full of love, care, and solidarity, spaces of learning, places where people come together to share experiences of oppression and joint struggles for liberation. The encampments embrace and centered various struggles around racist austerity, gentrification, violent policing, high levels of houselessness, lack of access to affordable housing and adequate food, and the struggles of oppressed people for liberation around the globe. And all of these have been connected back to the struggles of the Palestinian people fighting to survive and achieve liberation. Unfortunately, rather than defend and follow the lead of their courageous university communities who are speaking out against the genocide, many university administrations have responded with demonization and repression. Since the initial encampment at Columbia went up on April 17th, more than 3,000 students have been arrested across the country. Hundreds have faced the threat of suspension or expulsion. Thousands have been doxxed, harassed, and effectively blacklisted by powerful Zionist organizations, Wall Street firms, and hedge funds. Students at Harvard, the University of Chicago, UCLA, and Princeton have had their degrees withheld because of the ongoing disciplinary proceedings. There has been extensive police violence against students participating in the encampments and protests, with numerous examples of law enforcement brutally raiding encampments and arresting protesters, including professors. I myself was arrested in a brutal raid at the CUNY Gaza Solidarity encampment, where close to 200 individuals were arrested alongside me, along with more than 22 of those facing felony charges for protesting a genocide. So there have been many attempts to pass policies that would make it even more difficult for people to protest in the US. I don't have time to go through all of them, but there have also been, there's also the House Committee on Education and the Workforce, which conducted a McCarthyite hearing on alleged campus anti-Semitism, which is basically targeting students and professors for speaking out against the genocide. There's a growing public support against such draconian measures and how they undermine academic freedom, freedom of expression, and freedom of assembly on our campuses. Despite the repression, student movements have persisted. Protests inspired by the resilience and resistance of the Palestinian people have continued, and encampments have reappeared. Students increasingly understand the police force in this country, in the United States, as part of the problem, as they privilege protecting private property over protecting human life and are there to repress the movement. Of course, this is nothing new, as the racist police and prisons in this country have always targeted Black and brown, working class, and other oppressed communities. But what we have witnessed, and I'll conclude with this, in recent months, with the increased attacks on the Palestine solidarity movement, both within and outside of our universities and education institutions, is a worrying turn towards fascist repression, not only confined to those speaking out on Palestine, but also against other forms of institutionalized racism and other forms of oppression and exploitation, and against US wars and interventions in other parts of the world. People concerned with human rights in the US and globally are increasingly coming to realize that if we don't speak up now to defend academic freedom, freedom of expression, and freedom of assembly in regards to the genocide and support for Palestinian liberation, there will be nothing left to defend in the future. With threats that the US-Israeli war will be expanding into Lebanon and regionally, it is more important than ever that we defend the rights of the people to speak out and organize against the genocide and for the liberation of the Palestinian people and of all oppressed peoples. I thank you for your time and for organizing this very important panel.
Thank you, Ms. Mullen, for your great and impressive remarks. Now let's get to the last speaker, actually the real case, Bilalia Mohammed, the student of University of Geneva, and he's going to share his insights and experiences to us. The floor is yours, 3 minutes.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. In the name of God, the most grateful, the most merciful. I'm very happy to have the ability to speak right now and to share with you what happened in Switzerland, and basically in Switzerland mostly, since the beginning of the occupation of the universities in favor of Palestine. So I am a student in international relations at the University of Geneva. So just like maybe you have witnessed in the media, in the social media also, there has been a lot of movement in Switzerland to defend the right of Palestinian people to exist and against the horrible genocide that is happening right now. So basically, it's in the line of, just like our colleague just said a few minutes ago, it's in the line with all the other movement around the world, in the United States of America, in Europe, France, Germany, Switzerland, France, Germany, Spain, and all of the countries where students decided to protest against the genocide in Palestine. So basically in Switzerland, what happened is that the first occupation started at Lausanne, then Geneva, the University of Geneva started, and then it just like spread in the whole country. So basically, just like in the United States, the repression has been not a daily part, but at least has been present in the inside the walls of the universities. Basically, something is very simple. When you defend Palestine, you are going to be targeted. You are going to be accused of any horrible things, including anti-Semitism, of course. And the thing is that we, as students, we just wanted to raise the fact that the Palestinian people is suffering for 76 years of colonization, and even more because the first settlers came even before 1948. But basically, the occupation system in the university is just a response of the fact that Palestine has been occupied for like a lot of decades. I mean, it's just impressive the way that people think that our occupation are not legitimate, knowing the fact that Palestine has been occupied itself for over like almost 80 years right now. So one thing that is very important that we wanted to emphasize on the fact that anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism are two things that has nothing to do. Zionism is a political ideology. Judaism is a religion, a peaceful religion. We had recently in the University of Geneva an event that actually gathered a representative of Jewish Voice for Peace from the United States, so which is a human rights organization that defend the right of Palestinians, and that show that Zionism has nothing to do with Judaism. And there was also Marad, which is a decolonial Jewish collective in Swiss Normandy. And so it's very important the fact that Jews actually took the opportunity to show that their religion has nothing to do with Zionism. One thing also that has been a lot, how to say that, debated against the media, like in the media sphere, sorry, is the very famous and beautiful phrase, sorry, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. It has been targeted of anti-Semitism, of course, because they think that we would like to erase the Jewish population from Palestine, which has nothing to do with that. What we just want to do, basically, is that everyone in Palestine, Jews, Muslim, and Christian, can live in peace. And once again, people and settlers who are actually right now in Palestine, they're welcome to stay, just if they give up on their Zionism ideology, and if they want to, like, be part of a Palestinian state, sorry, peaceful, and yeah, that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mohammed. Now let's get to the questions. Please raise your hand if there is any questions from the panelists. Okay. So please, Mr. Salti, if you have any concluding remarks in English, please say it in 2 minutes. In 2 minutes.
2 minutes. Yes, it's first of all, I want to say that my speech is not anti-Semite because I'm a Semite. I'm Palestinian, I'm Arab, and I'm Semite. So don't forget that we are cousins. Don't bring our speech to be against Jews. As he said, our friend, there is a difference between Zionism and Judaism. The most anti-Semite today is the government of Israel because they speak by the name of Judaism and nothing in the Judaism belong to what they are doing now. So please be careful. Don't mix the term. We want peace. We want to live together, not be a nation beside the other. We want to live together like before 48. You know, 7th of October is not the beginning of the history. The beginning of the history is from 1948. And now we want just to fix the history at the 7th of October. So as a humanitarian and a doctor, a surgeon, I was, as I told you, in Gaza for 7 times, 24 missions in West Bank and Gaza, Lebanon, Madagascar, etc. I know Gaza, I know the hospitals, I know how they are working. They were working. Now there is nothing, there's no infrastructure of health. You know, if we have just gastroenteritis, we can children die today from a simple disease like gastroenteritis. So it is by the blockage of humanitarian aid and interdiction of entrance of drugs and food, we use another arm which is prohibited by the international law. So the famine, it's not, we are on 2024, you know, 21st century. We still now like, I don't know, I can't say like animals. It's not a good thing to treat Palestinians like animals. Why? I show you, excuse me, I show some pictures. Perhaps it was not easy to look, but the leader of United States of America has cried for virtual pictures which not exist. And I show you something which is real. They gave the army of the Israeli army to defend themselves, but now these photos, which are real, doesn't give the children of Gaza to be defended by the international committee. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you all audience for your time and your participation in this side event. Have a nice time. Goodbye.